Well, g'day guys. It's Glenn here from Happy Cow Milk Company. This is the Unreasonable Farmer podcast where we talk to unreasonable people doing unreasonable things. And today's guest is someone who is, I suppose, doing things that are not normal on the farm. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to have a chat with him. As always, please comment in the sections below. We really like to hear your comments. Challenge some of the things that we're saying, and hopefully we can have a good debate and learn something. So this week we're talking to Hamish Bielski from, where do you live, Hamish?
We're South Otago, not far from Balclutha.
Is that Clinton area?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks a lot, Hamish. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. And you're, I think the reason I really wanted to get you on was you're actually walking the talk. You're actually putting your farming system on the line and really doing things quite differently. And I wonder if you could explain your farming operation and your philosophy.
Was that a question? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I wonder if you can. Sorry. I need to learn how to be a better interviewer, but I wonder if you can explain your farming operation to us.
Oh, no, sorry, you just cut out a bit there. So we're on a 300 hectares rolling to some steeper country. We're drier part of Otago, 800 millimetres of rain a year. So wet winters, some wet springs, and then dry summers. So we started out in 2014 in an equity partnership with some amazing partners that were willing to back us and give us a go. So without them, we wouldn't even have a chance to try and do what we're doing. But it was about 2 years in where I do average years and I realized that we were not profitable enough to be sustainable, if that makes sense. So eventually we would just end up having to sell the farm or something like that. So I went along and listened to a scientist from Australia, Dr. Christine Jones, and she explained a management system, I guess you could say, of where you can regenerate not only your land and water and the people, but also your profitability. And I thought, far out, that to me that makes sense. So when she explained it, it made a huge amount of sense to me. But the challenging part was implementing it into a New Zealand context of sheep and beef, because nowhere else in the world are sheep the predominant part of your system. And also in development, where we're trying to take older, poorer pastures and put new pastures in, we were cropping wheat, barley, and oats. So 30% of the farm was our vehicle to do that. And then after understanding more about what we were doing, I'm glad we heard Christine Jones before we started putting everything back into ryegrass clover. And we put diverse pasture species back in, perennials, a lot of coxlets, timothies, and ryegrass with some bromes, etc. A good, 10 species mix. And 5 years, they have been invaluable to us through dry seasons, wet seasons. So really pleased about that.
So can you explain, why you did that? What's the reasoning behind that?
The reasoning behind it is we want diverse root systems which feed and interact differently with different microorganisms, biology in the soil. We wanted root systems that go deeper than just a ryegrass system, root system, and we wanted a variety of plants for the animals, for animal health and performance. Now, please, people have to understand that regenerative management, or the concept, is it's almost a distraction. The flowers and the hugely diverse crops, which are an important part, but for us, the most important part was our grazing management, and a lot of those plant species you sow dying out because they're annuals or they don't handle the competition from some of the more dominant perennial species. And that's fine. But we have different species that handle different times of the year. So they perform at better times of the year.
Within the same swat of pasture.
Correct, which is not always easy to manage. Let me assure you of that. That's why people just plant ryegrass clover, because it's more of a recipe. And so it has been hard to try and manage that at times, but we are getting a lot better. So anyway, we went into cropping, and the more I started understanding about the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, the energy cycle, and there's one other cycle, and soil health, biodiversity was the other one. Growing crops actually goes against all those.
Right.
Probably some of the most unnatural things you can do in a natural environment.
So explain why.
Because down here we were ploughing our soil, which is what most people do, plough and work the soil. So you give off a lot of soil carbon, you start to destroy soil structure, you destroy soil microorganisms, and your water runoff is increased. So we started losing lots of sediment into the waterways. And it also, lots of chemicals, like we were using up to 1,000 kgs of synthetic fertiliser per hectare. We were using up to 150 to 200 litres of diesel per hectare. And chemicals, lots of it, and pesticides. So all that we were doing, I was like, this is just completely going against where we want to be in the future. So we just ditched it and went back to all sheep and beef, livestock. And please understand that when we're talking greenhouse gases, what happens at the moment is methane is included in the equation, and therefore it becomes a large part of our equation, and fossil fuel use is minimal part of our equation, but they lump it all in together. So it sounds like animals are contributing to global climate change and destroying our environment. So we've gone down the path of trying to convert solar energy from the sun, which grows plants through photosynthesis, and our animals harvest. Now we've taken our total fuel use, diesel, per hectare from 100 litres per hectare on average over the farm down to 20. We've taken our chemical use from hundreds of litres per litres used per year to maybe over the whole farm 5 litres per hectare. You know, like our energy use, fossil energy, fuel energy use has dropped to the point where in a few years we could run this farm without fossil fuels. Maybe have an electric bike, maybe electric ute. But most of the fossil fuel energy we use is me running around off farm. So I just want people to understand that, don't get me wrong, when cropping and you start doing no-till cover crops and integrating animals, you can be generate your soils and your ecosystem really well. But that takes years, and it takes yield drops without reward. So some of the best farmers in New Zealand that are doing this have done it for 10 plus years, decades, and they are amazing, and I'm in awe of them. But we didn't have the time to do that, so hence all livestock.
It's that's an interesting point. I think there's a trade-off between, you can farm, I suppose, regeneratively, organically, whatever you'd like to call it, but it takes time. And the trade-off for what we would say conventional or modern agriculture is that you can potentially do a quick fix. Do you think is that true? Do you think that?
So true. It's so true. if I've got a problem, I can deal with it through like a chemical, a synthetic fertilizer, which are all good tools. Like we still use glyphosate.
Yeah.
You know, like if people want more plants and more crops, there will either be more glyphosate used, more synthetic fertilizers used, just more energy used, and more soil destruction. We can't have our cake and eat it too. So for me, the future is integration of livestock and cropping. So we could sow out the odd paddock into oats or barley or wheat every now and then, as opposed to being a cropping farm with some animals in our context. Now, look, also dairy farming. Let's think about the simplicity of a dairy cow. They are an amazing design. They eat with pasture and they turn it into high protein, high nutritious food through milk. And we milk our house cow. So the milk goes from our cow that I milk, my energy, into the bucket, into our fridge, and we drink it. There is nothing more sustainable and beautiful than that. The sheep supplies the most wonderful carpet, apparel, you name it. It is the most sustainable product probably in the world. We don't have to use any energy to harvest our wool. We've got this jersey that I'm wearing now. We've made it ourselves. It's an ag wool jersey, just a bit of a plug there. But any synthetic carpet that you put in your house is just all degradation, pollution. Nothing biodegrades.
What's petroleum based?
I don't understand why it's even still sold. And the meat that we eat just goes. We process the meat straight on your table as a pure natural product. So everything about that is completely sustainable and also managed well regenerates our soil, our water, and our biodiversity. So it is the management of our systems that is the issue, not the livestock. Now, turn it down, please, Maddie. In 50 years' time, when the world is at 20% of its fossil fuel use now, methane will not be an issue. The issue will be, how do we live the lives we do now on 20% of our fossil fuel use? And if you think that electric cars are going to be the answer, an interesting stat is if we want Japan to be all solar powered, you have to cover Japan and a half to run Japan with solar. So our energy use has to come down, and that is our focus on this farm is how do we get to using zero carbon, like no offsets, just zero carbon.
And that's the thing with animal agriculture is I think people who are anti it don't realize that there's so much cellulose in the world, which is plants, and humans can't eat a lot of those plants, but an animal, whether it's a goat, a sheep, a cow, or whatever, is able to harvest that energy that's just basically created from the sunlight and turn it into a product. And the whole methane issue is it's hard talking to people about this because they sort of believe that animal methane, like these cows, just automatically magic up methane and just dispense it into the atmosphere. But what is methane? It's CH4. It's one carbon and 4 hydrogens. So where did the cow or the sheep get the carbon from? Well, it got it from the plant, and the plant took the CO2 out of the atmosphere, put the O2 back into the atmosphere. The cow eats the carbon, goes into the cow. She ruminates and whatever, and it turns into CH4, goes back into the atmosphere where it came from before. So it's not any new carbon. It's the carbon that was already there. And in fact, there's no way that cow could actually get that carbon into its system unless it came from the atmosphere. But when you turn on a tractor or you turn on a truck, you're now burning fossil carbon, which is new carbon into the atmosphere that was pumped out of the soil or out of the ground deep down, and you're introducing new carbon. So a cow or a sheep is actually, carbon neutral, and because it simply couldn't exist otherwise. So that's me defending cows. Oh, we're stalled.
Oh, where are we gone?
Oh yeah, you're still there? We can hear you.
The research, they've just published research that cropping farms.
Oh, the South Otago internet. Are you there?
Yep, I'm back.
Oh, yep. You just published research. You said.
Yep, shows cropping arable farms lose 30, and forestry loses 16 tonnes per hectare, or it might be the other way around. It's similar per hectare from the soil, whereas sheep and beef and well-farmed dairy are high in soil carbon stocks. So pastures rebuild soil carbon, annual plants take out soil carbon, because where you have bare soil, you're losing carbon, and when you have plants that aren't growing, you're losing soil carbon. And also, if you have bare soil, you're losing sediment to the waterway. So this is one thing I can't defend to your crowd is winter cropping the way we've been doing it. I will defend livestock to the day I die, but I cannot defend the way we are winter cropping. So when you leave bare soil and you pug it to severely, you will into our waterways and you lose nutrients, and it degrades our waterways. Our local waterway here has been degraded for 17 years without improvement. I am responsible for that. What can I do to stop, not mitigate, but stop the continual pollution of sediment going into our local waterway? This is my context. I can't speak for anybody else. And this is what the regenerative principles and management and concept, call it what you like, it's ecology, and it revealed to me what I didn't know. I thought what we were doing was normal. It's just what you do.
Yeah, the winter cropping, you mean?
Yeah, just like winter cropping is not normal in nature, neither is cropping. It's man-made or so we went away from the winter cropping like with diverse species, so that at the end of the winter crop, they had, say, like rye corn or oat straw that was growing and the oats seeded, and you had the stalk would lay down litter on the soil, would plant things like plantain and phacelia, prairie grass, that at the end of the winter all started to germinate and regrow without using a tractor.
So you're saying you're wintering on to basically your diverse pastures?
No. These are diverse winter crops. So they still had Swedes and turnips in them, or kale. And it works really well. The yield was around. So there's a good example of that's one of them. Yes. Yep. And if we can yield about 12 to 15 tonne with that crop, then it really stacks up. However, we're actually trying to really focus in on our grazing management and control of our mobs, reduce our mobs from, say, 8 that we used to have, 10 or 8 mobs on our farm, down to 2. So we actually want to run more like a dairy farm concept. The dairy farm concept is pretty amazing. They grow a lot of grass, they are very efficient, and it works. Everything works well, but you must understand the damage that you're doing to your water, your soil, etc. This is, to me, what the regenerative concept has enlightened me. And if you don't like it, that is fine. I get that. Just let me just on that one. Regenerative name is a global brand that needs no big money to be spent on it, so people get awareness of it. And if our consumer understands that brand, then I'm more than happy to go with it. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm not going to get too hung up about it.
Well, yeah, farmers, you can get into the weeds and argue all night, but
That's right.
yeah,
that's right. So now we're going away from winter crops, and we do actually graze our young stock, our hoggets, with a local grain farmer who's now growing some diverse winter crops, and it's working so well. So that's where I see the future of integration between cropping farmers. He doesn't want to own livestock, but he needs them to rebuild his soil and his fertility. So that's what we're trying to achieve here.
So yeah, that's the thing. Crops, what you could say, take nutrients out of the ground and animals put it back in.
Yeah, the other beautiful thing about ruminants is people say ruminants are really inefficient. So everyone pumps up pork as efficient converters of feed into nutrition. And I'm like, yeah, but pigs and chicken can't take solar energy and convert it into highly nutritious food. So they need fossil fuel
or plants.
Yes. Okay. So chickens and pigs can't do that. They need fossil fuel energy to multiply and feed us.
Well, hang on. What do you feed chickens and pigs? You feed them grains and things, don't you?
Correct. That's right.
Where the grains? That's a crop?
The crops, yes.
Yeah.
And so
which needs
you need to harvest them, process them, and you need to bring the feed to the sheds.
Mm.
Our animals do all the work for us. Like it's a dream to watch. If you got some billionaire in Silicon Valley to try and come up with a machine that did what animals do, because we have so much pasture land over the world's globe, make billions of dollars from selling the IP from that invention. Let's switch it all around. And so people are trying to make fibers that do what wool does, but they can't. So people try and make fake meat, processed plant-based meat, to try and do what meat does. They're trying to do it with milk. None of the milks have near the nutrition of cow's milk or goat's milk or natural milk. So again, I just come back to is how we're doing it. And that's why, the Happy Cow Company is taking these things seriously, which peeve a lot of farmers off. And I get that.
Oh, no, they all like us now.
Yeah, no, I don't believe you. So it's for us, it's about trying to predict in the future what will be acceptable and what won't. And that's
key.
And we could be totally wrong or could be very right.
Yeah. And I mean, at Happy Cow, our bet, well, not our bet, I mean, it's just our feeling. It's just that we can't treat calves the way we do in animal agriculture and sort of, hold your head up high and compete against plant-based alternatives, I suppose, if you treat your animals like that. And that's, I suppose, a bet, or it's an assumption, but I think we're on the right track.
We have the similar ideas or thinking, and but don't get me wrong. At the moment, I try and be as honest as I can about all we do. And this year we're really dry. We're going into winter, into a southern winter, without that winter crop, a main winter crop like we normally do. And so I need that my livestock are well fed. So for the first time since we've been here, we're going to put 20 to 30 units of nitrogen over the farm mixed with humates to make sure that we don't eat our pastures so low that they start degenerating the soil, and that our livestock are always well fed, because poor doing livestock that aren't fed well enough is not regeneration. So everything about the regenerative concept is if you're not really profitable and you're not got thriving animals, thriving people, and thriving ecosystem, you're not regenerating. So it's about outcomes. It's not about what's the definition, what can I do or can't do. This is the difference between the regenerative concept and organics. So if we were organic farmer, we can fertiliser, so then we have to buy organic supplementary feed at about 30 to 50% price, more price than standard feed. Your options are so limited that you end up becoming not profitable if you're not careful. And in a sheep and beef operation, if we get dry and we have to sell a lot of our lambs store before we can finish them, we don't even get the premium. So whereas a dairy farm, organic dairy farm, will always have a huge amount of silage that they've made and can afford to feed that out for like month to month. Sheep and beef farms, we just can't afford to do things like that. So again,
because silage is more expensive to make. Is that what you mean?
It's more expensive to make, and it's more expensive to feed out. You need big wagons, big tractors, and you're also driving across your soil. And if it gets wet, it's still high energy use to do that. So when we come back to what are we trying to achieve here for the future, low to no energy use, fossil fuel energy use, then the system that we've got, we would argue it is the most sustainable, large scale system. Like there's permaculture and things like that, which are amazing, but not on a global system scale. And so we can't go down that track at this point because we had to pay lots of money for our land. We have high debt, and therefore you just have to be profitable or we have to sell. And if we have to sell, we can't do any regenerative management. There's compromises all the way through life and realities that I don't like. You have to work within those.
That's a really good point. And we have decided at Happy Cow that we're not going to be organic or regenerative or whatever the slogan is because every farm or every location is slightly different. Well, can be drastically different. And years are different, soils are different, natural disasters, floods, droughts, all those things happen. And sometimes farmers just need to do things they wouldn't normally do, but the conditions might dictate, and you don't want to tie yourselves down. And I suppose, like you said, you don't normally use nitrogen fertilizer, but you've decided this year, due to the circumstances, you're going to put a bit on.
That's right. Just on that point too, it's a good point. You are an organic farmer because you're certified, and then there's the rest of us. There's not all conventional farmers, because putting on nitrogen fertilizer is not regenerating our energy flow. So you could now say, well, I'm just a conventional farmer. But what it does is it puts me against the others. What I'm saying is, if for people who say, I'm not a regenerative farmer, I don't like regenerative, if what you're doing on your farm, any management practices are causing degradation, that's what you focus on. But it's actually about being really honest with yourself and saying, that's not actually that good. How am I going to work my way towards improving or regenerating what I have previously degraded? That's all it is. And if you claim to be a regenerative farmer and get angry about it, maybe you're not. I don't know. I almost am not. I'm just a farmer farming solar energy, trying my best in the circumstances that we are, that over time we'll just get better and better. And over time we'll have better soils, better biodiversity, better drinking water coming off our land. And our bank account's healthy, and we can pass what we've got on to our next generation and give them an opportunity. So we're thinking thousands of years ahead, not 5 to 10 years ahead or even 50 years ahead. And that's what I love about, the Māori thinking or the Indian, native Indian thinking. It was just generations ahead. And that's what I've learned to understand.
That's a good point, because a lot of farming is short-termism, and it's not really anyone's fault. I suppose if you look at the the dairy industry, you might have a share milker comes onto a new farm and they're there for 3 years. And they're not incentivized to think in the next 10, 20, 50 years. And possibly the farm owner is, but the structures and the incentives in place don't encourage that sort of thing. It's just one example. So you can farm in a way that's going to just benefit you in the next couple of years, and they're not necessarily best for that land.
It's such a good point, and that's why we're so grateful that our partners invested in us to give us the opportunity, give us the start, and now it's up to us to implement and be successful in all those factors, so we can keep going. Because once you're in, you can stay in, but getting in is hard.
Oh yeah.
And the the dairy farm system, so many things. Every day you make a choice. Because short term I need to get through the winter, and long term even long term there's no damage. Like the damage done mixing with humate and low rates is just no damage done, except in the process of making it, carting it, etc.
Yeah.
But it's understanding that in 10 years' time, look, I looked tonight and nitrogen fertilizer's gone up like $50 a ton. It's gone up nearly $100 a ton in the last 6 weeks. Now, if we think that they're now extracting 7% less oil out of the ground per year for the next 10 years, there's 70% less oil because it's getting harder to extract. If we think that we're going to get cheap energy for the rest of our lives, we're absolutely dreaming. And I don't know, it might be 50 years before, or who knows? But we're just trying to work the system. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And it's an interesting point. Energy just doesn't come from nowhere. And, you can't create it out of nothing. And whether it's solar that comes, or wind, or hydro, it has to come from somewhere. And petrol or oil has been the most efficient way of producing energy when you need it. But like you say, it's electric vehicles are only going to put more strain on those. But probably going into an area that I'm not very schooled up on. But
well, we're just on that. Just another stat is that 1 barrel of energy is equivalent to 10,000 man hours.
Productivity.
We don't understand. So our whole world is unsustainable. Our wholly unsustainable. As I say in my presentations, Air New Zealand win the Sustainable Airline Award. I mean, that's just a complete oxymoron. And if we say it enough, we believe ourselves. So this is what I'm saying. Methane's in 50 years' time, that won't even be talked about, because our issues will be just so huge with carbon.
Well, these electric vehicles are. I'm a bit of a skeptic, and my friends. I'm not very popular with my friends. But in the US, if you could drive an electric car, that's the closest thing you can get to a coal-fired car, because the majority of America's electricity is from coal or oil.
That's right.
And it's with such a small percentage of the fleet being electric. And how are we going to increase? How's that going to be more sustainable? And also, you've got to understand the mining of these minerals, the cobalt, the lithium. That mining is hazardous stuff, and that's not sustainable either. But again, it's just trying to find energy, and energy is not cheap, and it's not free, and it's not plentiful.
So can you see why I've come down to livestock, sheep and beef? They're just the most beautiful things for the human race in terms of sustaining the human race. And please, people challenge me, but unless you've been farming, dairy farm converts pasture into triple the amount of food that that meat does. So they're hugely efficient, and I think to feed the world, you've got to take it and you've got to dry it and put it in milk powder, because that's how the world system operates. Now, if we all just went to the like what you're doing, if we all did that in New Zealand, you'd get no, you won't get paid for your milk. Is that fair? Because we'll be 90% oversubscribed with milk.
Oh, I think we export 97% of our milk.
That's right. So we either need 50 million people here, or the reality is there are some realities in the meantime we're going to have to accept that milk powder is the most efficient way of feeding people. Yeah,
well, now we start talking about globalization and things like that. But what I wanted to ask you is, who are your equity partners? How did you find them?
Amy and I, we always say it's the miracle phone call. I was just weighing lambs in the yards one day. I got rung up by Neil Gardine. He was going to be a director on a company and wanted to know if I would vote for him. And I said, no, it's not me. Go to the manager. And he goes, I'll just ask you your thoughts anyway. I was really busy. An hour later, we had settled on the fact that they wanted to invest some money into a farm and they were looking for a partner, and we had some money to invest in a farm to manage. So it's just a miracle. You can't plan that. You can't work that in a million years. So Neil and Pip Gardine from just north of Gore, and they set it all off for us.
Oh, well, I married a Gardine.
You did too.
Oh, well, yeah. But anyway.
Oh, no, that's cousins.
Yeah. Yes. There's all the Gardines around Gore.
Yeah, it's the mafia.
And they breed sheep, and yeah.
That's right.
They're very good at it. Now I've lost my train of thought. What else do you think needs saying? I read through one of your, watching some of your videos. You're prolific. There's a lot out there. You talk about the thing that I found fascinating is you run all your livestock into the same herd. So you had sheep, lambs, hoggets, calves, cows, yearlings, all in one paddock.
Yes.
Explain that.
So if you want to grow more grass, you eat the grass quickly, and you trample uneaten pasture into the soil, so you're returning back. And to maximize photosynthesis and to maximize your pasture growth, you don't want to come back and eat those plants until they're fully recovered. So in the spring, it might take 20 days for a plant to recover from being eaten. And in the summer, like now, it's 50 days. And in the winter, it's 100 days. So we just adjust our round length. Nothing new to the dairy industry. So in a sheep and beef operation where you've often got all these different classes of livestock, it's so hard to manage that. So you're always eating plants that are not fully recovered. And if they're not fully recovered, you start depleting their energy reserves. So when we just slapped everything together and started feeding that mob really well, we end up growing more grass. So we've lifted our stocking rate 20% in 4 years. Just everything has lifted. Everything has gone up. Our profitability has literally gone up 200% or doubled, significantly doubled. Say from 140,000 profit of 280 hectares to $280,000. Like it's.
But how does running multiple livestock actually affect that? How does it make you? How does it encourage the grass to recover quicker?
Because when we're eating it when it's recovered. And so when you mow the lawns and they're long, and you mow them, what happens? They bounce back really, really fast. But if you mow the lawns all the time short, they can't maximize photosynthesis. What I learned most was panel. And when I realized I'm farming a solar panel, I'm farming solar energy, that just changed the way we saw things. So if we keep eating our plants short by multiple grazings, we're minimizing photosynthesis. So when we look at the big bison ruminant herds of the world, they would just eat, move. Predators keep them in a mob, and that built the great prairies of America and the savannas of Africa. You know, America had like feet and feet of topsoil. What has depleted that topsoil? Annual cropping. So, you know, 70% of Iowa is corn. And most of that corn goes into biofuel, but that's another sub. It's the animals that build these ecosystems into beautiful, fertile, clean water, diverse systems. And that's what we're trying to emulate.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand that, but I would think, what's the benefit of having a lamb in with a cow and a hogget in with a yearling and putting them all together? Wouldn't some classes of stock be disadvantaged? Like, wouldn't the cows eat all the good stuff first? Or
so when you're shifting twice a day, they're always getting really good feed. The whole mob's getting really good feed. You know, they're going into really good covers, really just beautiful, lush feed. So they're all getting well fed. But also understand is that at that time when I did that, I was trying things out. So now what I've done is I've got the young sheep, and I've got the older cattle in with the older sheep. So what you were saying is a really good point. So I've split into age classes.
Okay.
And that's working really well. But the principle is limit your mobs. So we still want 2 mobs. I just juggled around how I did that. I think at that stage when I was doing that, I had just 1 mob. Like, I was pushing the boundaries so much. The major problem with that was water. So when it got too hot, they're all around the water, and the big cows push out everything else. So that was why I split things more than the feed.
So, like a sheep, like, I don't know much about sheep, but they eat much lower to the ground, and they eat the smaller pasture, the smaller blades of grass, and the cows are sort of, their lips get in the road and they can't actually go that low. Is it beneficial to have those multiple classes together, or not really?
Having cattle in with your sheep is just hugely beneficial. It's very complementary.
Okay.
But if those animals are only in that part of the paddock for a half a day or a day, or even 4 times a day, sometimes we're shifting, it's not about it's duration that animals are in a pasture that's the issue. So if you spread out all your animals over our farm and just keep eating the plants over and over again, they just wear themselves out, and you grow 20 to 30% less feed. So by fencing up our farm,
and what's the reason for that?
It's just the solar energy capture.
So you've eaten the leaf off, so it can't actually photosynthesize. It can't because
So it needs reserves. So if you continually eat those plants, root reserves fade out, and then they need fertilizer. Do you need more fertilizer? And then you get into that more on system. And so although we will still use fertilizer when we need it, we understand that fertilizer, phosphate, potassium, they're all non-renewable resources. So if you want to be truly sustainable and use non-renewable resources, you can't. But understanding that, I realize that you do need to use them over time. And over time, we're hoping that we can develop our systems so well that we don't need to use them. But that's just a hypothesis. It's not a, I don't know.
I mean, I was talking to Nicole Masters the other day, and I said, if you're growing a plant like a carrot, for example, and you harvest that carrot, it's removed the nutrients out of the soil, you've taken them away, they're eaten by someone, you actually have to replace those nutrients.
Yep.
And she was saying, well, not really, because you should be able to, you shouldn't be depleting your soils all the time, because you should have something else that comes after those carrots that's putting those nutrients back in. And at the moment, we're just doing that by importing phosphate and wherever from Morocco or wherever we get it from. And I sort of thought about that, and I just said, well, it seems impossible to me that you can actually put all those nutrients back in without, I suppose, bringing an outside source in. What do you think?
No, I tend to agree. I mean, this is around the world, which with livestock, Gabe Brown's a classic example. No fertilizer since 2007. No, but he started to put animals into a system. Before that, he had no animals and was depleting his system. So in a cropping operation, I don't believe you can go forever without some major management input from sheep or cattle. Pure livestock system. I think if we grew 12 ton of dry matter, 10 ton, and harvested 60% and put back 40%, I think you could probably do it. But I just don't know. The other thing too is that research that we've looked at it from 1989-90. This is just between you and I and ag talk. Said that a 20 stock unit to the hectare sheep and beef farm was only removing 4 units of P. Now, when our fertiliser industry come on, they say we're losing, their maintenance is 18 to 25 units of P. I'm just like, this doesn't stack up. And what I've since realised from that paper is more of our nutrient issues are nutrient transfer within our farm. So on a dairy farm, you've got the dairy shed, they're always high in nutrients, and the ones out the back are lower in nutrients. The effluent goes back on the closer paddocks. The ones far away are poorer. On a sheep and beef farm, on a rolling hill country farm like we are, the sheep and the animals camp at the top at night and during the day, or under shelter belts, or under trees, or at gateways, or at water troughs. So nutrients get distributed all over our farm. So this is why that big mob that we've got going, we now strategically place that mob on parts of our farm where the fertility is not transferred to. So now we're just more evenly distributing our fertility from our ruminants. And please understand this other great, amazing thing about ruminants. Ruminants, 100% of 80% of what they eat is dung. So if they were so efficient that every kilogram of feed they ate, 80% was converted into food, you would just be taking so much more out of your system. Like it's almost like designed in such a way that we can sustainably go for millennia.
Yeah, it's designed to be inefficient, and the fact that it's inefficient means it's putting nutrients back into the soil.
That's right. So at the moment, because methane is this big hairy beast to people, it's now ruminants are inefficient. Ruminants are how do we reduce our methane and improve our efficiency? It's that dichotomy that it works against each other. But anyway, it's a big topic.
That's a really good point. But Brad has got a question. Thanks, Brad. We appreciate it. So a lovely concept. Organic rotational animal agriculture will not be able to replace the 70 billion animals currently consumed yearly. It requires far too much land. We still need a plant slant in our diets and far less animals, 95% less worldwide. then we can farm this way with no residual animal agriculture. What do you think?
Personally, I don't care how many animals are on the globe, on the planet. What I care about is that our farming systems are regenerating. So if that means cropping farmers need more animals in it to improve their land and their water and their nutrient cycling, so be it. If we as a sheep and beef farm here get well paid for producing low input crops, we'll have that as part of our system. Like, it's not about them or us. And feedlotted animals are only feedlotted animals because of the plant industry. So much of it's soya, corn, and the other one, wheat, canola, the byproduct industry. That's why it was started up, because they had all these byproducts they had to do something with. So if we just continually grow crops like we're growing, they said they've got 60 harvests left. So I can't understand why we need to eat more plants. No, we don't. We need to eat better farmed stuff.
Well, I would agree. So what Brad's saying is that, well, he's talking about the feedlots. We eat so much beef or whatever that we need the feedlots to feed all these people. But if the farms that were providing the corn and the soya that feeds these feedlots were actually farming alongside with animals in their systems, you would you can still have both. And
and I don't know what the number is. The numbers, who cares? If there's 50 million less livestock in the world sustainably and regenerating, so be it. What if it takes 20 million more, because we now have the American plains all now integrated with livestock, and it just makes the feedlots look small? I don't know. There's so much pasture land throughout the world you can't crop, and I understand that we should be planting more trees. Absolutely, we should. And we've got, lots of gullies on our farm that we just want to plant more trees tomorrow. But there's been no incentive, and we put all our money into buying the land. And then you just got to survive. Like, people either have to pay substantially more for food, or we don't get what everybody wants. You can't have it both. And so this is what really frustrates me about, like, the ETS or the carb, whatever. When people just buy good productive land and plant it in pine trees to offset their pollution, that's just complete brainless activity, which destroys water cycles, carbon cycles, because the carbon cycle is only for 27 years, and it destroys biodiversity. Like, please. But when you have trees integrated into our livestock systems, I cannot wait to that day, and it's probably going to take us 10, 20 years. So please, I asked all these big polluting companies, instead of buying land, put it into tree schemes, which help us fund en masse through New Zealand biodiverse trees.
Yeah, because pine trees are still a monocrop at the end of the day.
And same thinking in the same system that and the monocropping and the mono ryegrass, and you know what I mean? It's just a tweak of the system.
And I think, just referring back to Brad, I appreciate your comments, Brad. This idea that we need more plants to get rid of cows or animals or anything, it's actually the cropping that is the problem. It's the cropping in the US and Brazil and everywhere, this consistent corn and then soy, that is actually destroying the carbon, and it's this constant cultivation and spraying it out that is the problem. And Brad's got a good point here. 91% of all soil grown is used to feed livestock. Yep. If we feed more crops directly to humans rather than livestock, we would end world hunger. It's still crops though.
It, I don't disagree with them, but the 70% of corn is grown for biofuel. You know, like growing corn. Like, why don't they grow corn to feed people? Why don't they grow soya? Is not good and is not good human food. Why don't they grow like soya to make soy milk? Like, it's just water and a few added nutrients in a process. Like, grow crops that sustain human life for real. Like, even oats are such a great sustaining food for humans. Just straight oats, porridge. How boring
And
is
I
that?
think Brad's got a really good point there, that a lot of these crops are there to feed animals, and to plant a crop, to then harvest, to then transport to animals, which they then have to start a tractor to feed to animals, is a completely unsustainable way of agriculture, and it just should not be the way. You should have those fields that are planted in soy should be having animals just grazing there.
Absolutely, Glenn. I might have disappeared there.
No, you're still there.
It's because energy's so cheap that we get away with that, and it's efficient. Like, it's so efficient to feed such large animals of such efficiently grown monocrops. That's why it happens. I mean, we think it's insane, and in 50 years' time, we'll look back and go, "Did we actually do that?" But it's because energy is cheap.
Well, in the US, I think fuel's half the cost as it is here.
Yes.
And those cows will produce double, sometimes triple what a New Zealand cow would produce. So you put a cow on grass, she'll do maybe 25, 30 litres a day. And these cows in the US and Europe, they feed them soy, corn, they put canola oil in there, or canola, which actually speeds up their metabolism, which then makes them eat more, which then makes them produce even more milk. And it's just a cycle of going for more and more production.
In the name of efficiency.
In the name of efficiency, and you're sort of chasing your tail at the end of the day. I'll disagree with you, Brad.
Yeah. So as Brad said, oat milk is delish, and I'm sure it is, but we stopped growing oats because all the oats grown in New Zealand has at least up to 1,000 kgs of synthetic fertiliser, chemicals, fungicides, the often ploughed and worked soil, so losing soil carbon. So again, I come back to the fact it's how it's growing is the issue, not the product as such.
Yeah, I mean, you can have sustainable oats, I'm sure, but then you get your yield will drop. And I mean, I guess it's just the way you have to grow oats. You still have to go in and plough the paddock. You still have to then put in sprays. You spray it out. And I was talking to someone actually who has an oat milk company the other day, and their customers were saying they want organic oats. But they said to me that they've done the research, and organic oats has 3 times the carbon emissions of conventional oats. And they were saying, so what do we do? So there's no easy answers. And I think it's not a plant. It's not animal based. It's not organic. It's not regenerative. There's no easy answers.
No, it's understanding what's truth, what's actually happening. And so just on that, it was only last harvest for oats down here, that farmers stopped desiccating their oats with glyphosate.
Explain what desiccating is.
Just before harvest, you spray it with glyphosate to kill the unripened oats so that they all ripen evenly and they can get a nice, clean harvest of oats. Now, there were complaints by farmers that said, look, that is not in our contract. And the Haraway's manager said, I'll probably get shot for this, but he said,
no one watches.
If we put it in the contract, it'll get into the media. So, and now what they've bred high yielding oats that take longer to ripen and ripen unevenly. So now they've got themselves in a conundrum. we've just got a farm, local farm here, 700 hectares, that's been sheep for 100 years, has just been leased out to a cropping farmer who's now ploughed 700. That is the most destructive management that could be done on that farm, all in the name of plant-based mentality. I just want to get the point across. It's not what it all seems. There's no organic oats grown in New Zealand. It all comes from Australia. So that's unsustainable, because our organic oat growers that were growing it didn't get paid enough to compensate for the yield drop.
Yeah. I think we have oat milk in my fridge right now, and rice milk, and it's. I think we need to get away from this. It's a them and an us thing. And what I like Brad's contribution, and I respect your opinion, Brad. But what I think is that it seems that you're on team plant, and anything that happens that you say against plants, I feel like you have to defend the plant team, and you become tribal. And it's kind of like if someone's a dairy farmer and they're team dairy, and if anyone puts something or highlights the adverse effects of dairy or some of the issues with dairy, they then have to go and defend dairy. And I think we've got to stop defending ourselves and actually let's just look at the soil. Let's look at the resources it takes. Let's look at the facts and try and come up with something. And we're all different. Some of us like milk, some of us like oat milk, some of us like and prioritize different things. Brad's got a 500,000 tonnes of synthetic fertiliser used for dairy, 2 million tonnes of palm kernel per year, then 5,000 tonnes of coal to dry the milk. This is truth. Dairy is far worse than oats for milk. We need to look at the big picture. Well, but your oat milk's coming from Brazil and Australia, so you need to add that in there as well.
We now have dairy farmers using hardly any synthetic fertiliser, hardly any nitrogen, no palm kernel. So again, it's a system. It's within the system that is the issue, not the cow, not the oats, not the sheep, not the corn. It is all how it is done. So that is the truth, and I do not like that, and so many people don't. But just because that's bad doesn't mean something else is great, Yeah,
and I suppose I have this discussion with the horticulture people, like the most polluted river in New Zealand is in Pukekohe, with the highest nitrate levels, right in the market gardening area. And, the dairy farmers probably use per tonne, as Brad says, more nitrogen fertiliser than any other class of agriculture in New Zealand, but spread over a larger area where horticulture and crops, like you were saying before, Hamish, that you were putting 1,000 kgs of synthetic nitrogen onto your crops, where a dairy farmer would probably put 250 kgs of nitrogen on their paddocks over the entire year.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's plant growers put on 1,000 kgs of synthetic fertilizer, so 600 kgs of urea plus phosphates and potassium. So let's turn that, what Brad has just said, around, and let's say all of the Canterbury Plains and Southland and Otago are all oats. Well, then I would come out with those same stats. 500,000 synthetic fertilizer is used on oats. But when in Nelson, the soil is turning blue from a product called nitrophosphate blue, a vegetable grower who was up there and is now down here. And I was like, you're kidding me. So they're leaching 200 to 400 kgs of N per hectare. If these new water regulations come in, so many of the vegetable growers will be gone because they don't get paid enough for their vegetables, so they need to keep yield and production high. It's a whole system that needs to change, and people will need to pay more for food if they want what everybody wants, better, healthy ecosystem.
And I'll go back to Brad's point here. This is really good, and I appreciate it, Brad. This is not really trying to beat up on plants. What I suppose if we take that and let's say we replaced every dairy farm with a cropping farm, that 500,000 tonnes would be times 3, because those cropping farms actually use 3 times more synthetic fertiliser than a dairy farm does, simply because a dairy farm has got cows that are putting effluent back in. And I don't know, we better not keep you too long, Hamish. We normally go for about an hour. Brad's got another one. I agree with the system is the problem, but 70% of our export dairy is powder. We need to add value to our dairy, and yes, less synthetic fertiliser for horticulture and animal agriculture.
Yeah. Which I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah.
Like I said before, it's just because exporting milk powder is better than exporting milk with water. Like, that's I don't like it, we don't like it, but it is the reality, and over time it will change, and we just got to give it time and have a bit of grace or empathy for farmers, that farmers haven't driven this is a whole industry thing. This is a banks, this is a government, fertilizer companies, everyone else washes their hands clean from the destruction, and farmers get hammered. Farmers are just trying to grow food.
Yeah, I mean, farmers, it's like saying, well, it's a broad church, but farmers generally are trying to make money like everyone else and trying to make a living doing something they love. And that's not to say they're not doing the right or the wrong thing. There's good and bad farmers. Well, Brad, actually, we should get you on. You'd be a good co-host, I think. So we should keep in touch. Maybe the next one.
Thanks, Brad.
And actually, one more from Brad, and then we'll let you go to bed, Hamish. We need more farmers that care for the soil, like Hamish. Well done. And I mean, that's animal agriculture. I think we need more farmers that care about the animals too. Anyway. Thanks, Hamish. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. It's been interesting. I enjoy these regenerative agriculture chats. And Brad, we appreciate your comment. And thanks, Alejandra, for the horse comment too. Are you getting horses soon, Hamish?
We've got one horse for our daughter, but that's probably about as far as it goes. Horses drain your bank account. You will understand that too, Glenn. Just another comment before we go. It's people like Brad, Dr. Mike Joys, these people who really question the system, which have got me to understand more about what I'm doing to our land. I've appreciated actually what they've done and always do, and I love that discussion about just being honest with. And I always say to anybody, you're more than welcome to just come around our farm and just learn about what goes on and challenge me. And we've changed a lot of things due to those challenges from the guys like Brad. And that's where I started understanding the energy cycle and, fossil fuels.
Yeah. And that's why we call this the Unreasonable Farmer podcast, because all of these attitudes are unreasonable. I remember when Mike was, he might still be, but one of the most hated people in agriculture. But I email him quite regularly, and I haven't for a while. But he's been taking the time to reply to me and just fill me in on stuff, and it's really valuable. People like that. And,
totally. We got to meet up with him and talk with him in a cafe, and we're like Brad. We end up agreeing on the same thing. It's just we all have to adapt our thinking or our biases. And, because I'm a livestock farmer, I'm more biased. So I have to keep it in check and understand, I'm just kidding myself to try and protect what I'm doing. Always asking those questions. And I think about regenerative management, the agriculture, the whole word, it's a mindset. It's now, instead of saying, I know all this stuff, it's actually saying, flip, I don't actually know much at all, and just keep asking questions. And the questions never stop until you die, in my opinion, and that's how you keep growing and keep learning.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. And that thing you say about biases is really important. You need to have the actual self-confidence to be able to admit that you might be wrong or you might not understand something and not be threatened by it. And that's actually hard to do.
And I've learned a lot of that from you, from your journey through the podcast I've listened to from you. So it's hearing other people's stories that keeps you humble, keeps you empathetic, but also keeps you thriving and learning. So yeah, we are all in this together.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you and you're giving your time to us, but also to all these other groups. If you're interested, Google Hamish Bielski. He's got some really good talks and some really good slides that actually, when you see what he's talking about, it's easier to understand. And there's plenty of it there on YouTube. So we appreciate that, Hamish.
Yeah, no worries at all. Yeah,
All
you
right.
do it because it's a passion. You don't do it for the fame. Let me assure you, I'd rather be just snug at home with my family on the farm. But something drives you. I mean, it's what drove you, Glenn. I mean, that is just.
Yeah, it's not rational. Yeah.
No, appreciate what you're doing, and yeah, having
All
a
right.
ball following. So awesome,
All
man.
right. Well, I'm going to come and swing around your place this Christmas as I go home for Christmas, as always, and just say g'day as I drive through Clinton.
Always welcome. Be a pleasure.
All right. Hey, thanks for joining us, everyone. And thanks, Hamish, for your time, and Brad and everyone who's commented. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.
Sure, mate. See you guys.